Hello, my YouTube fam. I hope everybody's doing good. It is really challenging times. These are challenging times for sure for everybody. Nobody is exempt from being affected by what's going on around the world one way or another. And at the same time, unfortunately, it has to take really tough, challenging times for us to address certain issues, long due important issues. And here we are talking about the things that we should have been talking about for a long time now, right? And one of them is what I said in the previous video. It's all about our history. History is so important because history is a map to your identity. You cannot have a really clear identity without some portion of your history, right? So this led me to really, I did do some research about identity. I did do some research about our history, particularly as people of color, Black people, African Americans or Africans or whatever, Black or whatever color you are from all over the world, right? And I understand something, and I understand that if somebody wanted to overpower you in order to deprive you from certain things so that they can win, one of the techniques is to take away your history, therefore to take away your identity. It's remind me of a story of this girl who was abducted when she was 11 years old. For 17 years she was kept away from her family. But the funny thing is, she wasn't very far from her loved ones. But because she was so young and vulnerable at the time, the people that took her away programmed her, gave her a false history of where she's from, who she is, and what she's supposed to do, what she's supposed to build on. And guess what? She bought into it. And only 17 years later that she was found. But see, that 17 years was a loss, a huge loss, because she lost who she was, she lost where she came from. And as a result of that, within that 17 years, she was so invested in what she was told that she was or where she was from, and therefore she was laying a completely wrong foundation, and she was trying to build a future that later on would have crumbled anyway at some point when she would have discovered the real truth. When you build something on the wrong foundation, it won't stand the test of time. At a certain time, it will crumble, such as times as we're living in now, that things are crumbling all over the place, obviously mainly for the wrong reasons, but at the same time, it's exposing some truth, right? I took some notes, so if you see me looking right or left, I'm reading some of the notes that I've taken after I did some research. Guys, it is so important as Africans or whatever Black you are, from whatever you're from, to do your research and to really look into your history, because your history does make you or break you. Even though we overcome the lack of knowing the right truth, the thing is that it's good to go back to know so that we can have the right foundation and fill in the gaps, because when we fill in the gaps properly, it helps us to build and to go forward and really to take our power and particularly, you know me, it's all about Black economy, so that you could be self-sustainable and being able to help others, right? So I was just thinking about similar stories to this. In South Africa, in Cape Town, some time back, there was terrible droughts. We really had a serious issue of water shortage, right, all over. And this young guy, a UCT student, UCT stands for University of Cape Town, a UCT student, I want to mention his name. His name is Kosinati Como. He invented the grey water saving system. And mysteriously, during that time, you know how students are very innovative, you know, during that time as we're going through the drought, a really horrible drought, during that time, he came up with this amazing innovation that would have saved us so much water and would have sustained so many homes, right? But mysteriously, after inventing such a great idea that will save Cape Town, if not the whole country of South Africa, mysteriously falls off a building. It just fell and died. But here's a very interesting part. Soon after that, let me read this correctly. Shortly after that, a white-owned company invented exactly the same. Okay, exactly the same. Helen Zille, who happened to be I think the premier of Cape Town at the time, she was invited to the launch of, this technology that this so-called white company invented. Do you see where I'm going with this? That when you discover your power, who you are, what you're good at, and what you've got, opposition comes, and it can even cost you your life, just like it has cost people hundreds of years of history. It has cost millions of lives, and so on. One of Africa's best kept secrets, I think we all know, it is our history. Guys, I'm encouraging us to really start digging from whatever you farm. Do your research, to go as far as you can. Find reliable sources of information, reliable sources of history to empower you. For those that are outside Africa, maybe start connecting with certain people in Africa, the elderly. They are such they are gems. These people can tell you real history because they lived it. And not only that, there is a tradition in Africa when parents will always tell their children about the grandparents and the parents before that. And this obligation, this thing goes on from parent to parent to parents. So which means that parents are such a reliable source of good, right, accurate history. So to connect with the elders of different communities in Africa, I guarantee you it will give you some amazing information because they've taken it from previous people, directly from the mouths of the previous people. You understand? And these people lived this history that we are searching for. I'm just going to read some notes that I took and discuss it with everybody. And everyone is welcome to send us some comment and add more information for education. It's an open platform. So in the 19th century, there was a German philosopher, Hegel. Some of you may know. I learned that recently. I'm not going to lie. And he declared this. He says, Africa has no history. It has no history part. Is no, but sorry, let me correct it. It says Africa is no historical part of the world. Okay? To put it even better, somebody else after him, a professor of history at Oxford University, his name was Hugh Trevor Roper, okay? And he openly expressed his racist views, and he said this, he said that Africa has no history. And this is as recent as the 1963. This is not far, this is just around the corner. And this is what he was teach at University of Oxford. Do you know how reputable that university is? And some amazing brains can come out of that. When these people speak and teach, you take what they give you and it becomes part of you. So if they're teaching everybody around the world and say that Africa has no history, it's a terrible thing. Robbing a whole continent of their past and of their identity. But obviously there is a clear objective behind that. And the objective behind that is to make sure that as people of color, as Black people, do not know where we're from, do not know how powerful we are, do not know how rich we are, do not know how beautiful we are. Because like the example I gave you of the girl before, because she didn't know what she was, she went with the flow. So they told her she was a good for nothing, so she acted exactly like that. They told her what her future would be, and she was working in accordance to what they told her that her future would be. So certainly her future would have been what her abusers and kidnappers wanted if she had stayed around, if she wasn't rescued. And this is the same thing for our continent. But here's the thing, we all know now, or at least many of us, I know for certain, that we know that we're a powerful people, a beautiful people, an intelligent people, and we are a people of great wealth. There is no doubt about it. Africa is the richest amongst all continents in the world. Notice I didn't say country, I said continent. Okay, so because they wanted to take that knowledge away from us, that power away from us, what we were supposed to build on, they wanted to take that away from us. Therefore, they had to make sure that we were not aware of what our history is. So let me read some more notes. So based on, again, some research, how I'm just reading my notes now. However, even before the rise of Kemet, it seems like that an even more ancient kingdom known as Tasseti existed in what is today Nubia in Sudan. These are previous very powerful kingdoms in Africa. Okay, here's a very challenging idea. I know that a lot of people wrestle with this, to really struggle with this idea, with this statement. This may well have been the earliest state to exist anywhere in the world, because it was in Africa, so therefore people struggle with it, with that. Okay, so Africa can therefore be credited not only with giving rise to the many scientific developments associated with Egypt, engineering, mathematics, architecture, medicine, etc., but also with important early political developments such as state formation and monarchy. I know that it is hard to believe for some mind, because remember in a previous video I was talking about the fact that we were seen as savages. When you're a savage, you have no intelligence really, you just go with the flow. You are wild, you have no intelligence. Okay, so therefore you were seen as an inferior group of people, right? And remember, I also told you some of the findings of certain people like who were also professors at universities. They were saying they determined that the inferior race will disappear and the more powerful will remain. So they saw it that way. But right here, right now, this contradicts everything. Okay, it's contradict those statements. Okay, this demonstrates that economic and political development as well as scientific development was during this early period perhaps more advanced in Africa than other parts. Okay, perhaps. Let's do some research, because when you look at these other kingdoms, when you look at the history of this kingdom, when you do your research, you find that these people were powerful in trade. They did great things. They were ruling. How is it that they were doing that if they were savages? Okay, the African continent continued on its own path of development at the time without significant external intervention until the 15th century. In the 15th century of our era, some of the world's other great civilizations, such as the Kush, remember we talked about the Kush last time, one of the most powerful kingdom that was the Aksum, Mali, and Great Zimbabwe, flourished in Africa in the years before 1500. Again, remember, I'm never tired of saying this. Before the so-called civilization, before colonization, how is it that our forefathers were able to sustain themselves and be able to control times and seasons so that they will have enough vegetation, enough animals, enough of everything, and they sustained communities? How is it that they did that? Okay, something to think about. In this early period of Africans participated in extensive international trading networks and in transoceanic travel. Sorry for my pronunciation. Certainly, some African states had established important trading relationship with India, China, and other part of Asia long before these were disrupted by European intervention. We were not ignorant on trade. It's something we had already mastered. It was not determined by currencies that were introduced to us at all. We were already in a system of barter. We had our own systems. In fact, elders or chiefs of villages and communities, based on like experience that they've had, tangible experience, based on that they knew exactly how to handle this. In North Africa, a North African conquest of the Iberian Peninsula began in the 8th century and led to the occupation of much of Spain and Portugal for several centuries. Here's a statement that really spoke to me. Okay. It was gold from the great empires of West Africa, such as Ghana, Mali, Songwe, which provided the means for the economic takeoff of Europe in the 13th and 14th century, and aroused the interest of Europeans in the Western Africa. Indeed, it was the wealth of West Africa, especially as a source of gold, that encouraged the voyage or the travels of the early European explorers. Going back to a point that I am passionate about, and that is that the continent is crazy wealthy. Gold was the initial thing that triggered the invasion. Okay, gold. But then the thing is, it's not just gold, right? So when you search and you find that there's gold, and gold empowers us economically or many other ways, you will discover as well that there were others, and you know how many more resources that are on the continent, right? This is where it began. It was this. When it was discovered that these people have gold and a lot more, this is what began the invasion. But also this is why the idea of erasing history came about, because if they could erase history, then they could tell us that we are not that rich, right? And then they could tell us that you didn't know that you had this. We know that there was this and it is ours, and we know how to use this, right? So the resources were under our feet. We enjoyed them for ourselves in our own ways because we knew what trade was. We knew how to trade gold and other things. But when others discovered that we had it, it was really important for us to, for our history to be distorted. By the 15th century, where am I? By the 15th century, the African continent was already one of the great, was great in diversity. The extent of the great kingdom and empires such as Mali in the west of Ethiopia in the east were in many ways exceptional rather than typical. In many parts of the continent, no major centralized state existed, and many people lived in societies where there were no great divisions of wealth and power. The Ethiopian kingdom was unusual because the Orthodox Christian Church, which was an ancient origin in that region, had increasingly important state functions. So there were, you know, the Catholic or the Orthodox Christian belief were really introduced there in Ethiopia. But if we have a look, the most important thing is this, like most importantly, African societies were following their own pattern of development before the onset of the European intervention. My question has always been, how do you determine what real and true development is if you do not study first the place where you've just discovered and how those living on it are living, how they're sustaining it, how they're looking after it? How did they do it? I really believe that when two people or two groups meet together, we learn from each other. You take the good and you reject the bad. That's how you grow, right? But this wasn't the case. The case was that they came, ignored the possible good, the possible great education, and just imposed a lot of the bad. I'm not saying all the technologies and ideas and different things that they may have come with were not necessarily bad, but at that particular time, yes, because right now, where we are as people of color and Africans, We don't know a lot of the good of our old historic, times, the traditions, the cultures, the system, the own pattern of development in the communities. We don't know, right? We don't know, unfortunately. And when we don't know, what happens? We take on what is presented to us. This is why I encourage us to do research. Let's study our true history. I was so fascinated by all these amazing African kingdoms or communities that were at a time where it seems there was any kind of, how do I put it in a way that is not it is not offending anybody, before any European kingdoms were really talked about. Maybe the issue is that we're struggling with the truth that could be that life really began on the continent of Africa. I really want to hear some thoughts about that from other people and other research findings in that regard. I began with the story of that young UCT student who suddenly, mysteriously fell off a building to their death after they made a great discovery and created an amazing invention that could save lives. The reason why I brought up his story, an example of that young girl who was kidnapped for 17 years, and the reason why I dived into some of this research, although it wasn't in depth, it was just on the surface here and there. You can actually go and search for yourself as well. What I'm saying to us, particularly people of color, African people, my beautiful, powerful people, our history need to be found out. We need to find reliable sources of our true history so that we can become powerful. First of all, so that we can know who we are, where we're from, right? And we can prove the system wrong. We can prove those that are distorting or distorted our history to change the course of our lives so that they can dominate. We're not here trying to dominate. We're here trying to just sustain ourselves and be powerful according to our own normal rights as human beings. As simple as that. But the ultimate purpose of these videos is to encourage us, people of color, black people, African people, to rise up and to really start discovering their real source and start working on things, start creating things, start dominating in certain areas of economy to empower you and those that you love and those that you care about. Because if we understand our true history, it gives us confidence, it gives us a great foundation, and it allows us to move forward. And then we move forward with great ideas and innovation. But we are also light, we are not burdened when we move forward in that way, because we have discovered who we are and nobody can tell us otherwise. So for comments, thoughts, ideas, you're welcome to put it in there. God bless you.